Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning to hear 3 inspiring success stories about leading change while managing collections. I am very honored to be here this morning as your moderator. I am Dawn Zahner with Clarivate. I've been in the same general role for over 25 years in a sales role through 3 different companies, several acquisitions, and the one constant during that time of change has been the privilege to work with libraries and dedicated and incredibly talented librarians such as our panelists. For the flow today, we will hear from each of our speakers, and they'll share their stories, and afterwards, I will ask a follow-up question of each, and then we will open up questions to the audience. As a quick reminder about the code of conduct, that this is a safe and respectful place for all. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ed Leonard from Virginia Tech.
I'm a little taller than Dawn here, so. Okay, greetings everyone, and it's great to see all of you here today in the beautiful Colonial Ballroom. So as Dawn said, I'm Edward Leonard, Director of Collections at Virginia Tech, where I have worked for much of my career. The theme of my portion of today's panel is a nod to my predecessor, Paul Metz, who some of you may know, who wrote a widely known article called 13 Steps to Avoid Bad Luck in a Serials Cancellation. I don't think I have enough time here today to cover 13 steps, and I also wanted to put a little more positive spin on things. So I'm going to talk about 7 principles to ensure good luck when changing library systems. So first, a little bit about Virginia Tech. We recently celebrated our 150th anniversary. And our main campus is located in Blacksburg, Virginia, but we have some satellite locations around the state. We just completed a fall census of students and found that we're just 5 students short of the 39,000 mark, so we are growing over time. And we are primarily a residential campus, and about 80% of that total are undergraduate students. So we've had a number of library systems at our university, and the very first VTLS is short for Virginia Tech Library System, so it was actually developed at the university. Over time, we've migrated to different systems, and most of those have gone fairly smoothly. The one that was a little different than the others here was in 2018, we moved to Koha, and that was basically a very top-down decision from our chief of staff at the time. And I remember thinking that either he's seeing an opportunity that the rest of us are completely missing, or we were going to be stuck with a system we really didn't want for the next couple of years. And Koha can be a perfectly fine library system for certain kinds of libraries, but we quickly discovered it was not a good fit for an academic library with a large collection of electronic resources. So when the opportunity presented itself, we wanted to try to do a more balanced search for a new system and have a process that involved a lot of employee input and engagement. So the first of my 7 principles is change does not happen in a vacuum. These days especially, we all have a lot on our plates, lots of things going on, so it's hard to devote time and important to try to make it a priority. And this kind of ties in with the next principle on my list, which is change rarely involves just one thing, so it's not like you can devote all of your time to just one single project. And in our case, we were also involved with a project through the State Library Consortium VIVA to become a member of EAST, the Eastern Academic Scholars Trust. And as part of that, we needed to identify, analyze our holdings, identify titles for, and make retention commitments in our catalog. And we were able to get that process wrapped up about a few weeks before the due date for when we were going to start our catalog migration. So we were having things going simultaneously. The third principle is all about communication. And you may feel personally that you are over-communicating, but really that's probably not possible in practice because people may still not be following. So keep communicating by a variety of channels, and that will help get the word out to folks. So the fourth principle deals with delegating and distributing. And so this gets to that employee involvement issue that I touched on earlier. And a library system really impacts a lot of different areas of your organization. So it's important to try to include folks from all of those different areas and do so early in the decision-making process and get their input. And I think in relation to that last bullet point, I think it's also important to try to get people to envision new ways of doing things rather than just recreating workflows in a new system. So principle 5 is about bending but not breaking your timelines, and one thing often impacts the next, so a little flexibility is good, but you do need to keep the overall goals in mind when you're doing this. And with regard to something like the East project, we determined that we were not going to make it in time with our original plan, so we were able to recruit additional student teams to complete some of the work quicker. We were doing an inventory project as part of that retention analysis. And by bringing more students on board, that expedited the process and got us in where we needed to be for the catalog migration. Number 6 is divide and conquer. And basically from that, I mean, don't feel that you have to do it all, have everything perfect on day one of the process. And as an example of that, when we migrated to Alma, we did the circulation and other functions first, but the acquisition piece, we delayed that so that we can complete our fiscal year on the old system and kind of close out in that way. So my only caution with the staggered approach is you do have to be very careful that you're getting the different pieces of data out of the old system before that gets shut off. And then so lucky number 7 is celebrate your success. And I think it is not a surprise in a large project that everything does not go perfectly, but in our case, we did have a lot to celebrate. We completed the migration on time and on budget, and we did so with minimal impact on our users, which is really the important thing at the end of the day. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. I am delighted to introduce our next speaker, James Rhodes from the University of Virginia. James.
How's everybody doing? A lot of familiar faces in the audience. You all look great. Today's Thursday. If you've got a flight going out tomorrow, maybe you stay in Charleston a little bit longer. That probably is not going to make you like me, right? So I just want to say before I get started, I've had the great honor to actually be able to work both under Rob Tench and under Ed. It's really helped shape my ideas and how I approach things, and I just want to acknowledge the great work that they do in front of such an esteemed audience. We're stuck.
Sean.
Oh, I can get it. Here we go. So I'm from the University of Virginia. We have a pretty good university. It's If anybody screws it up, it's always me. Okay, here we go. So I just want to talk a little bit about the institution and give you some of the library data. We have a large staff. Our student body isn't so large, but our collection and our collection building is really large. You can see we have 5 million books, 3 million ebooks, and many other things that we have to keep track of. I work with one of the other people in Virginia that is just so good at collection development, and that's Beth Blanton. I don't see her in the crowd. She may be speaking somewhere else. But I'm very fortunate in that. And I just want to talk a little bit about what we did was, do you all remember February 18th? Okay, some people do. To us, it was kind of important because at that time, there was some business models that were shifted, and it required some change. And our change was unexpected. It wasn't expected. So whereas with Ed and even Rob and their scenarios, you know, they knew that they were going to change. They knew when the contract ran out. We didn't have that opportunity, and there's many others that didn't. And it's a business decision, and I understand that. And the vendor was very good to work with us, and they're still working with us. But we had to make a quick decision. And I have to give my supervisor, Beth, a lot of credit because she made a very difficult decision and acted quickly. And I thought to myself, ooh, maybe we should kind of, you know, not be so rash. I was more nonchalant about it. But Beth, with the experience that she has, she knew that there's so much involved when you're working with a book provider and you're working with approval plans, you're working with DDA, you're working with shelf-ready materials. It's very complex. Oh, and that leads me into this slide. So what we really were using ProQuest for through Oasis, we were using it for our English language approval plans. We have a number of approval plans. We actually have more non-English approval plans than we do English approval plans. And because we get things shelf ready, and we need the records, so we needed to create a technical profile, and we were doing this with limited staff, just like everybody else. So the orders that were impacted was much smaller than, say, what Virginia Tech was dealing with because they were changing their whole system. We were just changing this small part, but it felt so large. But I want to encourage everybody, when you go through change, even if you're a small institution or a small organization, you're not doing it alone because you have a partner in your vendors, okay? And Elise is out in the crowd. She's sorry to point you out, Elise. She's through Gobi, and she's just wonderful. And if you don't work with her, I hope at some point you do get a chance to work with her because she came up with a phased approach, and it was really helpful. So, and even though this is only a quarter of what we deal with print materials, we needed to do things. So you have to ask yourself when this happens, is it the right time to make large-scale modifications? Well, we did, and we couldn't move forward until we did that with the approval plans. So that took a lot of work, and my colleagues, Beth and Lee, did a lot of work in that. I got to do a little. And then I was more involved with the technical profile side of things, the acquisition of the materials, which is something we're still working on because, you know, it's not just one thing, but it's many things. Is this the experience that most people have? You know, it's not just, you think it's small because you're not talking about 5 million materials. You're just talking about maybe, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 that you have coming in per year. One thing is absolutely essential, and I agree with Ed on this, it's about communication. But I think if you're a leader in one of these changes, you have to not be afraid to make the decisions. I mean, you definitely get input, but I've seen it at so many places that I've worked where when there is change, people want things to be the same with a new product, a new system. And it's like trying to put a square in a circle hole, and it just doesn't work. So somehow you have to bring those people along. And I'm very fortunate because I have a group of people that are just have a lot of experience and are really good at what they do. And that's it for my thing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, James. And I am delighted to present, last but never least, Rob Tench, who is joining us from sunny Norfolk, Virginia, from Old Dominion University. And Sean, can we get, oh, Rob, perfect. You're on the screen, Rob, so you can say hi to everybody again.
Well, thank you, Dawn, and good morning to everyone. And I know I would like to say you look great, but I can't hardly see anybody except Dawn, Ed, and James. But again, my name is Rob Tench, and I'm head of resource fulfillment at Old Dominion University Libraries, ODU for short. And if you're wondering what resource fulfillment is, and most people do, it is collections, acquisitions, serials, and interlibrary loan. I've been at ODU since 2007, and my talk will focus on the merger of Old Dominion University and the Eastern Virginia Medical School, EVMS for short, and the merger's impact on collection management and development. Now, following Ed and James's lead, a few facts about ODU. We were founded in 1930. Our anniversary is just around the corner. We are in Southeast Virginia. We're near a lot of water, a lot of military bases. Until about 25 years ago, we were primarily a commuter school, but there's been a major push since then to make ODU more residential, with some success, although we still have lots of commuters and a sizable number of non-traditional first generation and distance learning students. Our head count is 27,000. Our FTE is about 20,000. 1,400 of those are EVMS students. We offer degrees at all levels, including 81 certificates. We actually have more undergraduates in arts and letters and business. At the graduate level, it flips, and we have the reverse is true with more STEM degrees and more STEM students. We have 3 million items in our collection, a materials budget of 5.5 million. 4 million of that is at the medical school library. And like Tech and UVA, we're R1, a member of ACERL, and part of Viva. So we merged effective July 1, 2024. That was our day one. That was ingrained into us over and over, day one, day one, day one. So we had 3 goals. Goal number 1 was to save money. And we were looking to combine subscriptions to get that savings. Number 2, we wanted to consolidate licenses and contracts that would cover both campuses. And goal 3 was to provide universal access so that EVMS faculty, students, and staff could access ODU resources and vice versa. ODU faculty, students, and staff could access EVMS products. So we took all kinds of action steps, and I've bulleted 6 or 7 of those, but serious merger planning actually began in late 2022 with the creation of, you could guess, a committee. We had a real catchy name for that committee. It was called the EVMS ODU Library Merger Committee. That consisted of 4 subgroups. Collections was one of the 4 subgroups. And EVMS and ODU staffers from each location, as part of the collection subgroup, compiled Excel list of databases, journal subscriptions, and journal packages with the purpose of identifying duplicate subscriptions. However, surprisingly, we didn't duplicate or overlap a lot. In fact, most duplication was resources from that we got through Viva. We decided that we would keep separate budgets, although the goal is to eventually have one budget that covers both locations. Now, ODU would, all invoices from vendors would come to ODU, and ODU would pay those invoices. In cases where we had subscription to the same product, we asked vendors to send us a 2-line invoice, one line for ODU, one line for EVMS. ODU Finance would pay the invoice, and then EVMS would do an interdepartmental transfer of funds to ODU to cover the cost. ODU procurement, we kept one one procurement department. That was ODU procurement that absorbed the EVMS procurement group. Fortunately for libraries, we have a outstanding relationship with our procurement department, which makes things much easier. We also, luckily for us, ODU procurement has been delegated legal authority by ODU legal, so we don't have to go through any kind of legal mumbo jumbo. We just deal with ODU procurement. One of our action steps is also one of our goals, which was to negotiate revised licenses and contracts so we consolidate them. That, luckily for us, even though we merged, we were still in the same tier, which helped with pricing. And I have to give our vendors a lot of credit. They worked with us very well. They were flexible about amending license agreement terms and conditions, including access and invoicing. We did see some price savings, although most pricing stayed about the same with reasonable renewal increases. Our consortium, Viva, was fantastic. Both locations, EVMS and ODU, receive a lot of product from Viva. I have to give a big shout out to Jenya O'Gara, the director of Viva. On our behalf, she reached out to the Viva vendors, and she made it clear that Viva did not expect any changes to pricing, contract, and licensing terms, and that all existing agreements would be honored, which they were. Happy to report that all but one vendor was on board, one vendor for one product. A big deal for us was establishing access, and we worked collaboratively with ODU and EVMS ITS departments. Again, went very well. Lots of cooperation again with the vendors. We provided vendors with IP ranges, easy proxy stuff, university authentication information. And our goal, our first step was to make sure that EVMS faculty and students could use ODU resources. That's been accomplished. Next step is to reverse it and make sure that ODU students and faculty and staff can use EVMS stuff. Finally, we changed our collection staffing model. Since 2018, decisions about collections have been made by a collections development team of subject selectors, but now we have a full-time collection development librarian with sole responsibility and decision-making authority for collections at both ODU and EVMS. And we're very lucky. We have a very talented fellow in that position, Greg Snyder, who I believe may be in the audience. And another big shout out to Greg. As far as what lies ahead, we're looking at flat budgets. ODU has not received any money for inflation since 2012. We've been told to not expect any money to cover inflation costs. We unbundled Science Direct in 2021, and we've been living off savings for that unbundling, but now we're tapped out. So what that means is cancellations, and we've already canceled this year, fiscal year 2026, about $65,000 of single title journals from EBSCO. We're also looking at maybe canceling 2 to 3 databases this year, but more cancellations are probably on the way in fiscal year 2027. We've been engaged in a major print weeding project as we transition away from print materials, especially for arts and letters, and go spending more of our money on STEM materials, especially in the health sciences. Related to that, ODU and EBMS are now collaborating with Norfolk State University to open a new School of Public Health, which means more spending on health resources. For us, another unfunded mandate. We've been very committed over the years to DDA since about 2012, but now with the changes at ProQuest, we are considering other options. We're looking at other DDA programs and looking a lot more seriously at evidence-based acquisition options. And finally, we are in the middle of an RFP for an integrated library system. We currently are on ALMA, and we may keep it, but we may switch. And if so, that would have another impact on collection management. Regarding lessons learned, I came up with this thing, the Bruce method, mainly to help me remember what the lessons learned were. There are 5 of these, and 3 of the lessons are pretty standard stuff. You always, for any project, want buy-in from staff. You want to develop collaborations and good partnerships with external, internal vendors. And finally, establishing timelines and goals, but hopefully they're flexible. So those are pretty standard things. But 2 of the takeaways that I think are important for us is, number 1, we used good analytic tools when it came to looking at these products that we may want to keep or may cancel. Your journal citation reports, your counter stats, vendor stats, unsub. And we also use the excellent value metric tool that was developed by Viva. And finally, and probably the ones that I think really work best for us, is simplify. Ed had mentioned divide and conquer in his presentation, and this takeaway is close to that. At the start of our project, we felt overwhelmed. It was like, where do we begin and what do we do now? James will know what I mean by that. But we took a deep breath, decided to slow down and work on one thing at a time, which made us feel a lot better, gave us a sense of accomplishment, and a confidence boost that we could finish off that much bigger project and much bigger stuff. As the saying goes, how do you eat a big meal? One bite at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And back to you, Dawn.
Thank you, Rob. So we had some really great stories of success in leading this kind of change, and I have a couple of questions, one for each of you. Let me start with you, Ed. So how long did the process of switching to a new library system take, and was there anything that surprised you?
So we took about 2 years from when we started to when we actually completed the migration, and potentially having more time could have been helpful, but really people's focus built as time went on, and as it got closer, it started to become more real for people, and even in the final weeks, people finally dawned on certain ones that this was actually happening. So we got the buy-in that we needed from different areas, but when we announced the intention to look for a new system, everybody was immediately naturally on board, right? But even though there was some unhappiness with the existing system, that was not the case, and you're probably not surprised by that. And part of that had to do with that there was just some residual hard feelings from the way that it had been handled in 2018, and people felt that their input had not been valued, and that decision just got made, and they were concerned that that was going to happen again. And I tried to say, this is an opportunity to do things differently, and over time, kind of won people over, I think, with that kind of approach. The other thing that I've found very valuable from making this switch for us is the opportunity to reach out more. Many of our peers are on the system that we finally chose, which was Alma Primo. and also the great user support that's available through things like Ex Libris Users of North America has been very valuable to us in this process.
Thank you, Ed. James, can you describe the thought process of making large changes and when you decide to proceed? And how do you decide how fast to move or to be more deliberate? Can you explain that a little?
Well, like I said earlier, ours was unexpected, and we didn't have a choice. You know, a lot of times you might have a system and people will complain and say, "Oh, it doesn't do everything I want, so that's maybe change." And then when you change, like Ed said, they say, "Well, maybe that old system wasn't so bad." But in our case, we didn't have that opportunity, and we knew that we had to do something quickly because we were presented with a timeline. Now that timeline, thankfully to the vendor, did change a little bit, but we had already had the wheels set in motion. We had put together a quick plan where we thought this would work. Of course, there's always pressure because we're dealing with almost 300 different vendors on a daily basis over many, many different things. So this was just another part where we had to say, well, these projects that we had thought we were going to do, we had to kind of put them aside because, you know, I know we all enjoy juggling many things, right? But when they throw the chainsaw at you and you're just juggling balls, then you're kind of in a precarious situation. So that's when you, in order to keep everything moving, you just have to really depend on good leadership, teamwork, and you have to really convince people that you can get through this. Just like Ed said, and I've been, like I said, very fortunate. I had an opportunity to work under Ed and glean a lot of his leadership aspects, and I just put that in place every day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, James. And Rob, what are things that you did well, and what are things that you wish that you did differently?
We work very collaboratively and very well with our partners, both internally and externally, and that was so crucial for the success of any success we've had with the project. I also think we worked hard in keeping pricing at a reasonable amount, and there was some challenge with aligning, synchronizing subscriptions. For example, say EVMS may be on a calendar year subscription, we may be on a fiscal year, so we're still working on that, but it actually has gone pretty well thanks to the flexibility of our vendors. And we've even expanded access to some of our resources. For example, EVMS had a full subscription to Access Medicine from McGraw-Hill, and in our renewing and negotiating with McGraw-Hill, that access was extended to ODU, and not a ton more money than, not a lot more money than you would expect. So that's a great thing, and I would say we did very well. What I wish we could do differently and didn't do differently is that we really we can't crack the code of getting more funding. And our dean goes to our provost and pleads the cause, pleads the case. We've done so much justification. We're now in the process of laying out what extra costs it would be to expand access from one place to another, but we just don't get the money we need to sustain and expand what we should do. So I don't know what we can do differently, but that's one thing that I wish we could have done differently to get more money to support the merger from the library perspective. Oh, and I have to say, thank you, Dawn, for being the moderator. I didn't say that to begin. Thank you.
Thank
Doing
you,
great.
Rob. Thank you. And then for you all out in the audience, do you have any questions for our panelists or an experience that you'd like to share about leading change in collections at your library?